Genshin 3.6 patch is just right around the corner, and we're beginning to rerun in this 3.6 patch. The Nilou rerun as well as the Nahida rerun. Wait a minute, it feels like these characters were just released, especially considering they are both Sumeru characters. Aren't there other characters to rerun miHoYo? If you forgot about it, it's probably not important, so it's whatever. With that being said though, these characters are definitely recent release and they're already getting a rerun, but some of stuff might have changed between then and now, especially for Nilou, who got better after the release of Nahida and then Yao Yao. So with that being said, are these characters worth your primo? Should you pull on these rerun banner? Let's talk about it in today's Should You Pull video, and let's get started. Starting off with Nahida, the Holy Danjo Archon, the Genshin meta destroyer, the I don't know, the
Duke Duke.
What's Duke Duke? Anyway, Nahida being a Danjo Archon is really good, and in my personal opinion, probably one of the best characters in the entire Genshin Impact right now, with really amazing Danjo application either on field or even off field. You can play her in both cases, and really amazing utility combined with really good damage. She's just deserving the title of the Danjo Archon. As the Danjo Archon, Nahida can just be really flexible and pretty much fit into all kind of Danjo team. Hyper Bloom team with something like Nahida, followed by Yelan Xingqius and Ryan Shogun as your Electro trigger, spread team such as our High Ham and then Nahida for a double Danjo setup, or even in an aggravate team like Keqing followed by Nahida. Nahida is a pretty straightforward to use character. Her elemental burst doesn't really have any major energy recharge issues, and her elemental burst you kind of just cast it and give you a buff, and that's really it. On the other hand, her elemental skill are also really straightforward to use. You bring it out and just kind of cover every single enemy on the screen, and they will get chained up, and then they will start to automatically apply Danjo to each other, and you can kind of bring Nahida out once in a while to refresh the elemental skill, but that's really it. So overall, I don't really have a lot to say other than Nahida is just a really good character. In my very honest opinion, I think Nahida is a character that every single account should try to roll for, assuming you have spare primo. Obviously, if you're short on primo and you're trying to save for another character, then maybe you want to prioritize your goal a little bit. But in general, if one were to ask me how likely would I recommend Nahida from a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 is like this character is really good and you should really consider pulling it for your account, honestly, I would put Nahida at a 5 out of 5, where like this is a character that you really want in your account. It is not a must roll. No character is must roll in the game, don't get me wrong. Like, don't break your bank, don't break your wallet over it. And if you're again looking for a different character that you really want instead, then feel free to go for those other characters instead. But otherwise, Nahida is a character that I would generally recommend everybody to roll for, just because it is really good and it can draft a lot of really strong team. Again, those are like Hyper Bloom team or even aggravate and spread team. With that being said, let's move on to the second topic, which is Nilou, who is a really unique character as she can only be ran with Danjo and Hydro characters. Now, of course, you can run her with non-Hydro and Danjo character as well. Like, you can run Vaporize Nilou, or you can even run Hyper Bloom Nilou using an Electro character. But those are not only just less popular, but they're also less intended. The reason why this is the case is because Nilou A4 passive only work when your entire team contains Hydro and Danjo character, and does not get triggered whenever you have another element that's in your party. Nilou is mostly a character that's specialized in doing AoE damage, most specifically in either mobbing content or just AoE floor in the Abyss in general. This is because of the way her Bountiful Bloom work, which is her A4 passive. You want to trigger Danjo and Hydro onto the same enemy to trigger the Bloom scene, but because of Nilou's specialized passive, they will convert these into the special Bloom, Bountiful Bloom, which have much more damage, scaling off her max HP, as well as just much bigger AoE. When you're fighting more enemy, there are just more enemy that you can trigger reaction off, since you can apply element onto multiple enemy with Nilou as well as the rest of your party member, so you can just naturally trigger more Bloom in general. And because these Bloom have really good AoE, ideally they can all hit each other, doing really good amount of AoE damage. While this effect is really cool, this reaction modifier is definitely one of the cooler mechanic in Genshin Impact. It does have a lot of drawback and restriction. The first and the most obvious one is of course the damage in single target heavily fall off, since you only have one enemy to trigger your reaction off now, and you can't really do those chain reaction bloom as there's only one enemy for you to bloom off and to trigger reaction off, and therefore your damage just drops significantly comparison to AoE. But the second biggest restriction of Nilou team is of course the lack of a grouper, as most of the grouper in the game are Anemo, same thing like Kazuha, Sucrose, or even Venti. And because Nilou team doesn't use an Anemo character because of the A4 passive, you just can't really fit a grouper in, and sometimes depending on the chamber, depending on the enemy type you're facing, you might have difficulty grouping the enemy up together. Nilou team being rather restrictive is definitely one of the most important things to call out. While it is possible to draft a really free to play friendly Nilou team using something like Nilou, Nilou, Kali, Danjo Traveler, and then blah blah, the effectiveness of your team will go down dramatically in comparison if you were to draft something with like a really good Danjo applicator like Nahida. In fact, I would highly recommend you to consider owning Nahida before you pull for Nilou, because the difference of having Nahida in your Nilou team versus the difference of not having Nahida in your Nilou team is absolutely massive, due to the fact that Nahida just applied Danjo really well, as we mentioned in the beginning of the video, and you really need those Danjo application if you're looking to do a Nilou Bloom team which is heavily reliant on spamming those Bloom reaction. The other thing about Nilou team being restrictive is of course the fact that Bloom have a self-damaging mechanics, so in general you can look to bring a healer, and again one of those are going to be either Babala, Kokomi, or Yao Yao. Babala being the free-to-play option but also just not really that effective. Kokomi have good off-you hydro application and can heal, but most importantly is probably Yao Yao, who is also a Danjo healer who can apply Danjo application while simultaneously being a healer. Conveniently, Yao Yao have really high Danjo resistance, which means that she also just tank those self-damaging Bloom really well, making Yao Yao one of the best choice when it comes down to your Nilou team healer. If you don't own these characters, if you don't own Kokomi or Yao Yao, that might be another consideration before you roll for Nilou, as it will just improve your team effectiveness so much more in compared to if you didn't have them. The release of Nahida was definitely a massive game changer for Nilou. Nahida applying so much Danjo solved her Danjo application problem, but just also let her draft a much better team such as Nahida with Xingqiu and then Nilou and your healer, and that just results in much higher single target damage than before, and which while it's still not the greatest and might not still be enough to tackle bosses, it definitely helped alleviate one of her biggest pain point, which is that she just completely fall off in single target damage. Or if you're really keen on it, you can even consider drafting something like triple Hydro with Yelan, Xingqiu, Nahida, and Nilou, and just using the Xingqiu Yelan duo to do really good single target damage while using the Nilou Bloom to do really good AoE damage, and those are some really valid options only available after the release of Nahida. And of course, Yao Yao did finally make the puzzle complete as well, being the only Danjo healer in the game, conveniently just being really good for Nilou. Of course, in the second half of the Genshin 3.6 patch, we do have Baizu available, who's gonna be another Danjo healer, but at the current moment with all the extensive playtesting, it is hard to say if he fit into a Nilou team, so that is something I will hold off for now. But with all those being said, even though Nilou is a much better character than before, and I would say she's relatively decent nowadays, I still have a major complaint about her. It's the same as before, which is I still think her team is just a little too restrictive and a little too niche. The inability to bring a grouper definitely was something that I didn't like, because she is a character that specialized in AoE content, but if you can't group the enemy up together, then AoE doesn't really serve a point, and depending on the enemy you're facing, it could be a massive problem. And of course, the other one is that her team is just a little too restrictive. Not being able to bring other element really sucks when it really counts. Noticeably in the current Abyss, you might want to bring something like a pyro applicator like Xiangling in order to deal with the lava troll, but the inability to do that is definitely gonna really hurt your performance when it comes down to bring her into the Genshin Impact Spiral Abyss. And while Nilou's single target damage potential is a lot higher than her initial release, it is still not gonna be a choice that you initially bring into boss chamber that require heavy single target damage, especially in comparison to many of the other top tier meta teams that are specialized against dealing against single target damage bosses. This is especially true against the latest Spiral Abyss boss, the Weenut, who just doesn't really give you enough time to attack on Nilou. And to be very honest, Nilou team will completely fall apart against the Weenut because it is just incapable of dealing against those kind of enemy in general. With the release of Nahida and then Yao Yao, I think Nilou is definitely in a much better spot than before compared to her initial release, but still, I think she's a little too niche for me to recommend, especially over many of the other characters available in Genshin Impact. Don't get me wrong, I think she's still a really decent and good character. Her single target potential is alright, but her AoE potential are absolutely insane, can easily destroy many chamber if you're playing her in the right circumstances. But the keyword here is that you have to play her in the right circumstances, and nowadays Abyss is mostly about creating and drafting teams that are universal, dealing with every single situation, rather than trying to create niche teams that are only good in certain situations. Because of that, if one were to ask me on a scale of 1 to 5, where how would I recommend Nilou in terms of your account pull value, where 1 is just don't pull for this character and 5 is you really should consider this character, I would put Nilou somewhere in the middle around a 3, like just above average. I think Nilou is an alright character if you're really keen on it to roll for. Nilou does have her shrine, it's just not good enough to be recommended over many of the other characters also available in Genshin Impact. And with that being said, that is today's should you pull for these rerun kind of video. Let me know what you think about these characters in the comment below, and if you're gonna be pulling for them, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.